3 minutes for opening statements. Your call, whatever you prefer.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Congressman Cicilline, good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is an incredibly important time in our nation's history. I'm running for Congress because I want to help effectuate change. I think we need more leadership. We need a stronger voice in Washington. We need stronger voices here in Rhode Island. I think that this is the greatest country in the world, but Washington is too polarized. Republicans and Democrats can't agree on anything. They couldn't agree that it's daylight out right now. So we need people who can sit at the table and find common sense solutions to problems. Okay. Common sense solutions to problems. We need to look at our debt, our $16 trillion debt. We need tax reform, regulatory reform. We need a robust energy policy. We need to look at fraud and waste and corruption in government. And we need to look at a strong health care system. So, folks, I'm running for Congress because I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe this is the greatest country in the world. We have so many intransigent issues facing us throughout the world. And America is a leader, and we need to continue to be a leader. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being this forum. Thank you, Mr. Doherty, for being here. And thank you for being here this morning to listen to us. I'm running for Congress because I think it's very, very important that we have someone in Washington who can stand up and fight for the things that matter to Rhode Island and matter to our country. We are experiencing the worst economy since the Great Depression. The middle class of our country has been hollowed out by housing crisis, wild excesses on Wall Street, by big banks who are allowed to do whatever they want that brought our country almost to the brink of collapse. And what I've been fighting for, what the President has been fighting for, is the things that we need to do to strengthen the middle class in this country, to put people back to work by investing in education, infrastructure, innovation, small business, by protecting and honoring our commitment to seniors, checking Medicare and Social Security, honoring our veterans, making the investments in the things that are necessary to grow the middle class of our country. The Republicans in Washington have put forth a different idea. They say, let people at the very top have more tax cuts. The wealthiest people in this country will trickle down to the rest of us and all we do. That's a failed economic policy. George Bush tried that. We had the worst job growth in 50 years. And so what I'm fighting for is what we can do as a country to protect the middle class, to keep the commitment we made to protect Medicare as a guarantee, to protect and strengthen Social Security, to deal with the deficit in a responsible way, in a balanced way. That is, generate revenues, close tax loopholes, and cut spending. Do it in a balanced way. And there are big, big consequences to this election. On the environment, this has been the most anti-environment Congress in a generation. On women's issues, women have been under attack by the Republican House Commission Congress. On education issues, there have been efforts to slash funding for Pell Grants and other investments in education. This election will decide fundamentally how we move forward as a country, what kind of America we will be in the next generation. And I'm here to ask for your support so I can invest in and work hard for an America in which everyone has a fair shot at the American dream, where hard work is rewarded, where everyone plays by the same set of rules, everyone pays their fair share, and everyone has a chance to succeed for themselves and their family. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First question, and they won't all be about the Middle East. I can promise you that. Pardon me? 2 minutes after I ask a question. So many American Jews and Israelis are astonished, if not dismayed, that Obama, unlike Mitt Romney, has never been to Israel, either as a candidate or as the incumbent. Does it send a signal about his position vis-a-vis the country? And if so, what message does that send? And if you're returned to Congress, or if you go to Congress, what would you encourage Obama to visit and why? So, Congressman, the first question is for you.
I, of course, would encourage the President to visit Israel, and I have no doubt he will. But I don't think it sends a signal. I think this administration, the way we have to judge this administration is what has the relationship been between the United States and Israel. And I think it's not unfair to say that the relationship, as the President has described, and I think as the Prime Minister has described, there's absolute alignment between the leadership in Israel and the leadership in this country. I think what we have to look at is, and recognize, of course, Israel is our most important ally in the region, the only really thriving democracy in the region. Our history and relationship goes back from the very beginning, And it's because we have a shared set of values. It's not, it's, you know, the values that exist in this democracy are the same values that exist in the state of Israel. So we have to be sure that we continue to support, obviously, aid to Israel. I'm proud to have been an original co-sponsor of the Iron Dome legislation so that our security relationship continues to be strong and aligned. And I think what really matters is the policies, that is the support that we provide, the cooperation in our defense, the regular contact between the administrations and our intelligence forces, and all of that, you know, clear support to me matters much more than a visit. I think a visit obviously is really important. It's what's most important is the funding that is provided, the commitment to the security of the state of Israel. The President has made it unequivocally clear that Iran cannot be permitted to have nuclear weapons. We have been part of an effort to lead the international community to do that, to impose crippling sanctions on Iran. So I think the actions, both in terms of the Iron Dome and all the other support that's provided, and I think the recognition by the leadership in Israel and by this administration that this is an alliance which is inseparable and unbreakable, and that we stand with the nation of Israel. The President has been clear about that, and that's how we should judge the administration.
Mr. Doherty, 2 minutes.
I think that, in my opinion, a visit by President would be absolutely, it's too late, it's a little late now. Would have been great if the President visited Israel in his first term. We need to remember and understand that actions speak louder than words. We have a special relationship with the state of Israel, with the people of Israel. I had the opportunity to visit Israel a couple of years ago on a terrorism training program that I went on with other police administrators throughout the country. And I just found my visit to be really eye-opening and a real educational experience for me to understand the plight of the people of the state of Israel. Beautiful people, but in fear of when the next attack will be. And they shouldn't have to live in those conditions. I remember being in the Gaza Strip on the border of Gaza, and just the ominous feeling of traveling around there and then up in the Golan Heights. So I think it would have been very beneficial, not only for, all due respect to the President, for him to have traveled to Israel, but also for the Israeli people to understand that he supports them and this administration supports them. I think we've sent a mixed message to the people of the state of Israel. They need to know that America stands shoulder to shoulder with them. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and we need to let the people of the state of Israel have certainty to know that that's the position the United States takes.
Which is a perfect segue to my next question, and Mr. Doherty will get first shot at that, so that Congressman Cicilline can either counter or speak just independently with his answer. At what point, if at all, should Israel expect the U.S. to intervene with military force in Iran? What would the situation look like if Israel acted against Iran unilaterally, or is it appropriate for another government to dictate U.S. foreign policy?
Well, I think we know that, and we all agree that the robust economic sanctions have had an effect on Iran. The Iranian currency has devalued about 40%. That's working in some respect, but we also know that we haven't changed the attitude of the leadership there. Ahmadinejad has not been a responsible actor on the world stage. So we need to continue to with the sanctions, we need to continue to, and by the way, Ahmadinejad's term expires, I believe, in June, and there's unrest in Iran. So I think it's just an attitude change for leadership, but we can't wait until June. We need to support Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his initiatives now.
I've had the privilege of serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and so I've had the opportunity to both participate in hearings on the issue of Iran and study this. And I think this is a very complicated and dangerous situation. I don't think there is any question that the entire world is in danger if Iran becomes the possessor of nuclear weapons. And I think the President is absolutely right that containment is not an acceptable policy. It cannot be permitted to happen. And I think we have to continue to build support within the international community to prevent that from happening. I was a co-sponsor of the most recent round of sanctions, which are really crippling the Iranian economy and creating additional unrest in the country, which hopefully will lead to a change in leadership. But I think we have to be also aware that Israel as a sovereign nation has an absolute right to defend itself. And the complications of what a military strike would look like, whether it were to be initiated by the State of Israel and joined by the United States, or initiated by the United States with Israel at the outset, or some other configuration, presents extraordinary challenges because of the placement of the operations, because of where this work is being done in the mountainous regions in Iran, what the likelihood would be of an attack occurred, what it would mean in terms of the delay the development of a nuclear weapon for months, for years, or less time than that. So this is a very, I think, dangerous set of circumstances. I think what we have to do as a country is be sure that it is very clear to Iran that we will not permit the development of a nuclear weapon, that we recognize the right of Israel to defend itself, and as an ally and strong defender of Israel, we are prepared to stand with them. But we should all be working, as I think we are, to prevent a military action from being necessary, to achieve this goal without military action, because the consequence of that, I think, for the world and the region would be there.
Thank you. Mr. Doherty, what role should the U.S. play? We've got Middle East springs now, first in Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, and Yemen. What significance do those Arab Springs play? And again, what role, if any, does the U.S. have in either fostering them or quelling them, or?
Well, I think we all agree that we're in very, very difficult times in this world. And there's a geopolitical impact on anything we do in the Middle East. But again, I just can't express my support more for the people of the State of Israel to stand shoulder to shoulder with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But there are other areas within the Middle East and Northern Africa that are in difficult times. But we need to maintain the strongest military in the world, which we have. But we need to maintain that. So just we need to balance America's interest against the need for any military action. The last thing we want to do is to rush to a war in any country. We don't want to do that. I'm a firm believer in soft power, smart power, diplomacy. But there are so many countries that have civil unrest right now. But the one we should be focusing on is our undivided support for the people of the state.
Before Congressman Cicilline speaks, I may have a good timekeeper, but I'm not so good at keeping track of who goes first. I realize that I gave the first to Mr. Doherty twice. We'll give the first to Congressman Cicilline. But again, I encourage each of you to use your when you're the second of the two to answer the questions, I encourage you to counter your opponent's position or speak solely to your own issue. So Congressman, and then you'll get two first shots.
Well, I mean, I think part of the way that we ensure that Israel remains a vibrant and strong democracy in the region is to also understand that what's happening around them matters a lot. And so we have an interest, not just in securing the state of Israel by supporting Israel directly, but becoming engaged in that thoughtful and responsible way with the Arab Spring and figuring out how we help to foster kind of an end result which is better for those countries, but also better for the world. And we believe that democracy and giving people a voice produces better results in terms of what happens in a country, but it also produces better results in terms of our relationship with other countries because of the values that democracy reflects. I think the challenge we face in the Arab Spring is that there are many of these countries where there are people who are rising up and yearning for democracy and yearning for self-determination and for a say in their civic life against very repressive regimes. And the challenge always is sort of what follows, who takes control of the government subsequent to these Arab Springs. And I think that's the challenge. We don't have control of that. We don't know what that will be in any given country. We're seeing what's unfolding in Egypt. And so these are challenging times. It's not for us. We don't get to decide, of course. But I do think that we have to pay close attention to the way the Arab Spring continues to unfold and the way these uprisings develop. And if we can figure out who is likely to be the party or the group that is likely to lead the country, to begin to develop relationships with that entity or those individuals, that organization, so that we can foster democracy in other parts of the world, but obviously do it in a way that doesn't engage our military in additional war. So I don't think anyone knows the answer to how this all unfolds. I think, it is always good when people rise up and seek their own self-determination.
Thank you. You had spoken first, right? So, unfortunately, but certainly in your closing comments, which we'll also have time for. When I worked in Washington 30 years ago, I'm showing my age, there was a joke about the difference between a kindergarten class and Congress was that a kindergarten class had adult supervision. Today, it is so much more broken than it was 30 years ago. The partisanship is horrific. Democrats blame the Republicans blame the Democrats. We have moderate members on both sides of the aisle. Olympia Snowe of Maine, Evan Bayh from my home state of Indiana, are walking away. And they're saying, I don't want to do this anymore. As a member of Congress, what practical things would you do? What practical things would you help foster to fix what is clearly a broken system? I'm going to give these next two questions first to Congressman Cicilline because I screwed it up.
I think it is obviously broken, and I think it's broken for a lot of reasons, but there is incredibly, I think the opportunity to build relationships, because I think most of this happens when people know each other, and even if you can disagree with someone very passionately and strongly about an issue, if you know that person, you have a relationship with that person, you can have respectful disagreements. And I think that used to be the way it happened in Congress, and it doesn't happen anymore. I think it's in large part because there's no opportunity for people to actually develop those relationships. In the old days, people moved to Washington, they lived there, their kids moved there, their parents, their spouses socialized. They really developed relationships. It doesn't exist anymore. So one thing that I did, which is a small thing, but it was a way to try to create this opportunity to get to know each other, was I came up with the idea of this Common Ground Caucus. So if you're a Democrat and you want to join the Common Ground Caucus, you have to go find a Republican to join it with you. If you're a Republican, you have to go find a Democrat. And the idea behind it is really just to socialize, just to get to know each other, because you can't necessarily vilify somebody that you know. You're going to play bridge with them Saturday night or go to a movie with you and your spouse. So I found a Republican woman, Nan Hayworth, a freshman Republican, to start it with me. We've done it a few two gatherings. Small, I think now there's like 20, 22 of us in it. It's a small step, but I think opportunities like that where we can just get to know each other and work together. I've also become involved in an organization called Mill Enables, which is a national organization, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, that are committed to problem solving, not, that are committed to working together on issues. So I think there are things we can do, but the other thing that makes this a particularly challenging time to do it is there are really big differences between the parties right now on big issues. The Republicans want to end the guarantee of Medicare and turn it into a voucher. We don't. The Republicans are trying in many ways to retreat on women's reproductive health. We don't. The Republicans are trying to make really deep cuts in education. We oppose those. The Republicans refuse to put revenues on the table at all in the deficit because of the Grover Norquist pledge. We believe it has to be balanced. So there are also big differences, which makes it very challenging.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Doherty?
Yes, thank you. Again, actions speak louder than words. And Congressman, you talked about the Common Cause Caucus. Is that the name? Common Ground. That's great. I commend you for trying to find common ground, but it's not working because the dialogue by you is all to attack the Republican Party. Frankly, I think that Democrats come up with good ideas and Republicans come up with good ideas. And I think they need to work together, and not in a cribbage league or a badminton league or something like that, socializing, but at the table, to be able to reach across the table and find common ground. This country needs to move forward. Congress has about 15% approval rating, it goes back and forth from 10% to 18%. You couldn't run a business like that. Congress is broken right now. And so I think it comes down to having a strong voice, people to sit at the table that have adult conversations, to be able to move America forward, and to be able to fight through this gridlock and just the party labels. And it's just not working. It's not working for us. And Congressman, in all due respect, all you do is criticize the Republican Party and try and tie me to people that I don't even know, and voted, I believe, in the 90 percentile with your own party. We need people that can reach across the table to vote with their heart to bring America forward.
I'm curious, who have I tried to tie you to that you don't know?
You're tying me to people that I've met for like 2 seconds.
No, you just said I tried to tie you to someone you don't know. Who have I ever tried to tie you to that you don't know?
Well,
Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, John Boehner, who all supported you and giving you money? So, I mean, who have I tried to tie you that you don't know?
Have I socialized with those people?
I didn't say you're socializing. They support you and you support them. So don't say you don't know them.
Well, there's a lot of people that support you that you probably don't even know. Is that correct?
But what I'm telling you is you just said,
you
you
want to
just
talk about
accused me of
support.
telling you something you don't know.
If we want to talk about
You're
support,
running as a Republican, you're committed to electing Republican House leadership. That reflects a certain view on issues. You have to own that. These are people who are financially supporting your campaign. You went to New Hampshire to work to elect Mitt Romney. You have the support of Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, John Boehner, Eric Cantor. You said you're proud of it when you're in a Republican gathering. They're not so far away. They're in Washington, D.C., which is where you're trying to go to represent Rhode Island.
Okay.
But to your point, you're talking about people who have supported you. You have people that have supported you that you don't even know. Is that correct?
That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is I'm a Democrat because I believe in the values of the Democratic Party. I'm proud to have the support of the Democratic leadership, and I'm fighting hard to re-elect our president and Democratic leadership. So you have to own that. You're running as a Republican.
I'm fiscally conservative, and I want to grow jobs here in America.
But don't suggest that you're being linked to people you shouldn't be linked to. These are people who are supporting you, and you
second
support
highest
them.
unemployment rate in the country here. We were just voted the 50 out of 50. The worst states to do business in.
And
you have to take ownership for some of that.
Let's move on. You can address those issues in your respective closing comments. But next question again goes, I think this is your second or first question.
Yes.
You had talked, Congressman, about this being the most anti-environmental Congress in history. We're in a, New England is rife with old and energy inefficient homes, factories, and places of worship. Leading scientists are telling us that global warming is causing irrefutable damage to our ecosystem. What is our government's responsibility and role in greening the country and sort of allaying the global warming impact?
Well, our first responsibility is to accept science. Global warming is real, and we have a responsibility to address it in a responsible way, and we ought to do that. We adopted a whole range of policies that understand the science behind carbon emissions. And we need to be making investments in the development of clean renewable energy. We have proposed, for example, repealing subsidies that we give to big oil that the Republicans have been fighting relentlessly to protect. $4 billion a year, $40 billion over the decade, and instead invest those in renewable energy. We need to have an energy policy that, as the President said, has all hands on deck. Solar, wind, geothermal, natural gas, but we need to do it in a way that's responsible, that protects our environment, that recognizes we can do both things, create jobs, produce energy, reduce energy costs, and be good stewards of our environment. We have had hundreds of bills that have been described as anti-environment, that eviscerate the EPA, that make our water dirtier, that pollute our air, that allows strip mining at the base of the Grand Canyon. National environmental groups have all said this is the worst anti-environment Congress in a generation. They're trying to undermine really what were for many years bipartisan consensus on protecting clean air, clean water, food safety, all these, and they're under attack. And so we have a set of bills on energy that really invest in the development and production of clean energy. The President has made weatherization a very big part of the energy policy of this country to reduce consumption and to produce efficiencies, particularly in old buildings. We need to fund those programs. We need to be serious about making investments in research and science that will advance the production of renewable and clean energy. And we need to do it in an environmentally responsible way. And we can do both. We're the home state of John Chafee, who was a great environmentalist, a Republican, who understood he could do both things.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Doherty.
I'm not one who denies the possibility, the effect on greenhouse gases as being caused by mankind. I believe we need to continue to look at the Kyoto Protocol, which is the United Nations footprint on greenhouse gases, and to try to create a cleaner environment. I've just recently embraced the Infrastructure Jobs and Energy Independence Act, which speaks to, obviously, Infrastructure Jobs and Energy Independence Act, which speaks to rebuilding our infrastructure, our crumbling roads and bridges and whatnot, by the lease of federal lands for energy development. We've been talking about energy independence since 1973, since the Arab oil embargo, but really have done nothing with it. Nothing to bring America forward in that respect. So we need energy independence, and a piece of that, the revenues from that, go to clean energy and renewable energy and all above, all-inclusive energy policy.
Thank you. The jobs issue is obviously key, both nationally and in Rhode Island, with us having the second highest unemployment rate. And both campaigns at the national level tout their ability to bring more jobs to America. Is it really the government's job or the private sector's job to create new business opportunities and stimulate job creation? If it's the private sector's responsibility, what can the federal government do to get out of the way and let it happen? Or if, on the other hand, is government's role, what should it do better, and what plans should be implemented? Mr. Doherty, you've got it first.
Thank you. I believe that it's government's job. It's government's job to create an environment for the private sector to grow jobs. We don't do a very good job of that, especially right here in Rhode Island. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the United States of America. That's shameful. We can do better than this. It's the private sector that grows jobs. So we need to roll a red carpet out for the private sector, the small business community. So we talk about, and I know the Congressman talks a lot about building the middle class. We agree on that. We need to make a stronger middle class. And to do that, we need to create jobs for them, to help put our friends and our family and our relatives, take them off the unemployment rolls and give them the opportunity and the dignity to go back to work and follow the American dream. So it comes down to, in my view, tax reform and regulatory reform. And I've already talked about a robust energy policy, but tax reform. We have one of the highest, not one of, now we have the highest corporate tax rate in the world of all industrialized nations. We need to bring our corporate tax rate down. The Simpson-Bowles plan, which I have embraced, talks about that, to help create more jobs for Americans.
Thank you.
I don't think the answer to the job problems is less regulation and lower taxes. I think we tried that, it's failed. I think what we have to do is make investments in things that are necessary to grow the middle class of this country and grow jobs by investing in the middle class. That means, as the President said, investing in small business, investing in innovation, investing in infrastructure, investing in rebuilding American manufacturing so that we can make things that get here again. Change some tax policies so that we repeal tax breaks that currently companies get for shipping American jobs overseas and instead incentivize creating those manufacturing jobs right here in America. Understanding that we have to give startups and new businesses and entrepreneurs access to capital. I serve on the Small Business Committee. Access to capital remains an important issue. Making sure we have a trained workforce. Employers in Rhode Island have positions available that can't find workers with the skills necessary. Again, a big difference between the Republican House leadership and me is they attempted to slash workforce investment funding, which is the money that's necessary to train people with the skills they need for the jobs of the 21st century. Investing in science and research. Proposed deep cuts in science and research, which are key to us leading the world. We also need immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, so we can continue to be a place which attracts the best minds in the world to come here and study and develop new technologies and new cures for diseases and all that. So I think the big difference is, I believe by strengthening the middle class, who are really the job creators, middle class families who have money in their pockets, who can buy the goods and services business produces. That's how jobs get created. Strengthen the middle class, not giving more tax cuts to the people at the very top. We've tried that and it's failed.
Completely confused. You go first?
I think so.
You go first. I was thinking about something else. This is a completely off-the-cuff question that I just thought of. I think we are still subsidizing tobacco farmers and spending millions upon millions upon billions of dollars on cancer research. I know we're subsidizing corn farmers, and we're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on addressing obesity, either through rising medical costs. It's insane. Why are we subsidizing industries that are killing our people and costing us millions?
We absolutely should not be, and we have tried, at least since I've been there, to repeal both subsidies. Subsidies to large agricultural corporations and subsidies to big oil. Because what's almost as offensive, or maybe equally offensive, is we give subsidies of $4 billion over the next decade, $40 billion to big oil. They received, big oil companies last year had profits of $136 billion. I think we had 3 separate votes to end those oil subsidies, and unfortunately, along party lines, the Republican House leadership and the rest of the Republicans voted to keep those subsidies in place. There is absolutely no public policy argument to support that. They're only in place because of the power of the lobbyists and the special interests of the oil industry in Washington, because there is no explanation why we should be giving subsidies to the industry that had record profits, $4 billion. It's outrageous. It's the same thing with large agricultural corporations. They should end, and the House Republican leadership has resisted both.
Mr. Doherty.
Okay,
So I hope Ms. Doherty will agree to vote for repeal of all those subsidies.
you know, I think it's worth the conversation, but you talk about the lobbyists. It's the lobbyists that you take money from. I've challenged you to return your lobbyist money, and you never even responded to us. So let me say,
Does that mean you're going to vote to repeal the oil subsidies, Mr. Doherty? Are you prepared to tell people that? You'll vote against your party to repeal and end subsidies to big oil?
Yeah, I'm not for the big subsidies to.
Are you going to vote to repeal them during Congress?
I believe I will. I believe I will.
There's a question.
So I don't espouse the idea of the subsidies to these big companies. I think that especially with the tax code, our tax code is like a maze for like when kids going to a carnival or walking into a maze through walls and mirrors. Well, some of the large companies they don't have to walk into walls. They get a map to the maze, and they get that map through Congress and through lobbyists. And so that's something that I would shine a light on when I go to Washington. I believe that we need to look at the loopholes and the tax expenditures and subsidies to these major companies. And we shouldn't be paying people to farm and paying people not to farm.
Thank you. Moving into the issue of jobs, we have a number of people whose kids are new college graduates, can't get jobs, loans are skyrocketing, loans are being defaulted upon, costs are increasing, and there are no jobs for college graduates. So they go on to graduate school, adding to their college loans. Solutions, ideas, I'll leave you first.
Sure. I think that we need to look at driving down the cost of public institutions so that the private institutions have to, private colleges and universities have to compete with that. The national average in 2010 for a college graduate is $25,250 in school loans. In Rhode Island, it's $26,300 for a recent graduate. Now, I know a lot about this because my daughter and my son just graduated from college in the last few years, and I hear in the conversations I have with their friends about the debt that they had, and I know what the cost of these colleges were. It's astronomical. It's astronomical for Americans to go to, especially private institutions today. So I think that that's something that Congress actually needs to look at in 2013, because this could be the next crisis in this country. The debt that these students have, and again, with a high unemployment rate. I remember being at my daughter's graduation a couple of years ago, and my wife was excited, everyone was excited, the kids were coming down with diplomas, and I said, this is a happy day, but it's also a sad day, because there's no jobs for these kids. So we need to create jobs here in America. We need to create jobs.
by helping the private sector grow jobs.
And how would you propose driving down costs?
Well, like I said, I think we need to drive down the cost of the public institutions, the state universities and state colleges, and the private institutions will have to compete and bring their costs down. Because right now, my son graduated from Brown Grad School a couple of years ago, and I think it was something like $50,000 a year for him to go there. And it's not attainable for some kids, especially they can't get grants or loans.
Congressman?
This is a very serious challenge for lots and lots of Rhode Island families and lots of young people all across this country. It is becoming increasingly difficult for families to have the opportunity to send their kids to school, and increasingly difficult for kids to send themselves to school because the cost of a college education or post-secondary education is really out of reach of most middle-class families. And I think one of the things we have to do is we've got to look at how we increase our investment in higher education and increase Pell Grants. Pell Grants used to be designed to cover the cost of college and create incredible opportunities, named after our great senior senator, Claiborne Pell, because he recognized that access to education was really the best ticket onto the middle class and for productive, prosperous life. And that's really threatened in most families right now because of the high cost of education. Unfortunately, the proposals from my friends on the other side of the aisle have been to cut Pell Grants, which make it harder to send your kids to school. They passed the first Ryan budget that allowed interest rates on student loans to double. That's in the first Ryan budget. So, we're fighting against people who are trying to go in the other direction, make it more expensive, harder to get. It's short-sighted. It's bad for our country. It's bad for those families. We've got to create more opportunities for families to send their kids to school, more opportunities for young people to access higher education and investing in it. This is about investing in our future. It used to be we led the world in K-12 education. It's not the case anymore. And we have to continue to be a beacon of excellence for the entire world in terms of our higher education institutions and our research and our science and our discovery. And investing in this is important because it will help drive down healthcare costs, it will lead to new discoveries for disease, it will help drive down energy costs, when we develop new technologies for the development and production of renewable energy. It's really key to our prosperity as a country. And we have got to invest in it. And obviously, to the extent universities and colleges can drive down costs, we should encourage that. This is really about making sure resources are available to access education for as many families as possible.
Congressman, you're on first. January is right around the corner, despite the fact that election day has not come yet. And both human services funding and military funding will both be cut significantly if Congress doesn't pass a balanced budget. Is a balanced budget feasible and achievable, and if so, how? And if not, what will happen?
Well, I think there is no question that, so I think it's more than a balanced budget, it's actually a big deal. It's a resolution of a whole range of big issues that need to be decided in a big deal. And I think there is absolutely no question that that will and has to happen, because I think everyone recognizes, who has looked at all of these issues carefully, that it is impossible to do nothing for another 4 years, that there is no way to sort of kick the can down the road on all these issues. And so I think everyone recognizes that there is no question that action will be required. And I think the fundamental question, and this election will decide it, is what will that big deal look like? A big deal has to happen. You just the numbers will not allow nothing to happen. So there are decisions that have to be made about the future of Medicare, the future of Social Security, our tax policy, all of the investments that are made in our federal budget. And I think, frankly, what that deal will look like, I don't know what it should look like. I think it's more like the balanced view of Chris Van Hollen, the Democratic alternative. But ultimately, the American people are going to decide what that big deal looks like. Because if the Democrats take back the House, and the Democrats retain control of the Senate, and we re-elect the president, the deal will look one way. It'll be, I think, a balanced investment, closing tax loopholes, generating revenue, making cuts, but doing it in a way that promotes economic growth. If the Republicans win the House and take the Senate and elect Governor Romney, I think the deal will look different, very different. And I think that's ultimately going to be decided by the results of this election, which is frankly how it should work. I mean, I think these are big questions that will impact generations about whether we secure the guarantee of Medicare, whether we continue investments in Pell Grants, whether we change Social Security. So the American people are going to get to decide this. And I think there is no question there will have to be a deal, but I think no one knows what that deal will look like until the election results are produced, and then that will shape and that's how it's supposed to work. So I think it's going to be a busy few weeks there, but I think that's the right.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Doherty.
I agree with the congressman, it is going to be a busy few weeks when, in 2013, when this new Congress goes back. We need to cut our $16 trillion debt. We just can't turn this debt over to our children and our grandchildren. This cannot be our legacy. We need to look at cost-cutting measures. I've already spoken about the Simpson-Bowles plan that I've embraced. It talks about Social Security, Medicare, and discretionary spending. Discretionary spending, I think we need to look at all of the departments within the federal government and to audit those departments and find where they lack efficiencies. I know that from talking to people, and I know in the federal government there are so many silos of government that aren't working together. There are departments within agencies that are doing the same thing, and because of personality conflicts are not communicating, and actually those silos are actually duplication of services. We have fraud and waste, so much waste in government right now. We have hard-working Americans trying to put food on the table, trying to put kids through school, and we have the GSA training period that turned into just a big party, $823,000. We're picking winners and losers in Washington with Cylinder that wasted $536 million of taxpayers' money. So those are things, you know, I bet there's so many people in Washington that have different views on this, but I'm a firm believer in the Congressman mentioned the Pell Grants. I would vote for the Pell Grants. There are some things that are essential to the American people that we need to keep, but there is also, hopefully Republicans and Democrats would agree that the fraud and waste in government needs to be, we need to shine a light on that. And then we need to also look at some of our foreign aid. There are some countries that perhaps we shouldn't be just giving foreign aid to.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty. I'm going to take a little bit of a question from last night's playbook, at least the part I saw. We've seen so many attack ads. Each of you has put out ads attacking the other's position, rather than promulgating what you would do either as a returning member of Congress or as a freshman member. So I'll start with Mr. Doherty and ask you to speak exclusively to why you believe you're qualified to hold this position. What have you done to deserve being sent to Washington as a congressman to represent the 1st District of Rhode Island?
Well, it comes down to leadership. And I think that we all agree that we lack leadership in Washington, we lack leadership here. I was just at a forum for public occurrences last week, and they were talking about bringing jobs to America. And the word leadership was used over and over again. So I think it comes down to leadership, and you mentioned the attack ads. The congressman is trying to convince seniors.
No, we're asking for you to speak to your skills, your attributes.
Okay. I'm just responding to you mentioning the attack ads. Yeah, I believe it comes down to leadership. Leadership's not about ranks and privileges and titles. Leadership's about taking responsibility for what happens on your watch. We didn't see that 2 years ago in the city of Providence with the mayor. So it comes down to having an attitude to bring to Washington, to have a strong voice, to be able to sit at the table, reach across the table, and find common sense solutions to problems. I've already said that, you know, I think Democrats come up with great ideas, Republicans come up with great ideas. We need consensus in Washington to bring us forward. If we can't find that, we're not going to move forward.
Thank you.
I'm asking people to vote for me because I believe that I have demonstrated that they can count on me to stand up and fight for things that matter to Rhode Island families. That they can count on me to stand up and fight for the investments we need to protect our investments in education. I have a record of doing that. I fought against Republican efforts to cut investments in education. They can count on me to stand up and fight for women, and stand with women as we should ensure they have full access to reproductive health care, that they be granted equal pay for equal work, that they be fully protected by Strength and Violence Against Women Act, against Republican efforts not to do the same. They can count on me to stand up and fight to bring manufacturing back and end the tax breaks that are shipping American jobs overseas and keep instead those jobs here. They can count on me to fight for the profit rule that will guarantee that millionaires and billionaires can pay a lower tax rate than teachers and police officers and secretaries. They've seen me stand up and deliver services to constituents in my district, working with Jack Reed, Sheldon Myers, Jim Langevin, bringing tens of millions of dollars in federal funds to our district and the jobs that come with it, bringing solving individual problems from constituents in my office, over 1,000 constituents, and fighting for legislation that I think is important to Rhode Island to get our economy back on track, and fighting against legislation that I think will hurt Rhode Island, hurt our country. And I likewise that I make again is when I'm running this time, I will work hard every single day on behalf of the people who sent me to Washington to fight for Rhode Island. I think everyone who knows me well knows I work hard, I fight every day for Rhode Island, and I continue to do that in much longer than 8%.
Thank you. We're going to pretend we're no longer a democracy, but a monarchy. This is the last question before I open it up to audience questions, and we'll reserve a few minutes at the end for each of the candidates to make a closing statement. So if we were a monarchy, Mr. Doherty, we'll start with you. If you were in charge, king for the day, what would be the single individual action you would take to make America more efficient, more just, more equitable, better? What would it be and why?
Well, that's a good question. If I was king for the day, I think I would fire all the divisive members of Congress and start over. Republicans and Democrats, by the way. And that's why. I think because we all know that Washington's too polarized. This just isn't working, folks. We need people who can sit at the table, again, and find common sense solutions to problems. The congressman often criticizes me because I'm a Republican. I happen to think that Democrats and Republicans can work together. They both come up with good ideas. So I think it would be fabulous in this next Congress if we could see members of Congress actually not in socializing at pubs, but actually working in Congress to work together to bring America forward.
Thank you. And Congressman, you've had your experience in Washington. You're the king for the day.
I think the single biggest issue that would help to really reinvigorate our democracy is to end the influence of corporate money in our elections. So there are 3 bills. I'm a co-sponsor of all 3. I would, by decree, and make them law, reverse the decision of Citizens United so that corporations cannot spend secret money in order to buy our elections. 2, the Disclose Act, so that any money spent, that people know where that money comes from, so voters can evaluate how much weight to give it. And enact the Fair Elections Act now, which is a citizen finance campaign model. So, and 4th, my own bill, which would prohibit members of Congress from ever becoming lobbyists. So I would, by decree, enact those 4 reforms, which I think would substantially break this connection between money and politics in Washington and restore our democracy.
Thank you. I would like to open it up to questions now, and again, please ask questions rather than speechify. I'm going to start with Peter because he got his hand up first.
It's a question to Mr. Doherty, and it's a question about how to reduce the big federal deficit. You say you support the Bowles-Simpson, that is the President's Committee report on solving the federal deficit. Do you realize that Paul Ryan torpedoed that report? He was on the committee and he didn't agree, and it would have moved Congress if he had agreed. And do you realize that with only a few exceptions, the party caucus you would join is committed against revenue enhancement? It seems to me that if those 2 things are true, and if you are in favor of Bowles-Simpson, you should have run against the congressman in the Democratic Party primary rather than as a Republican. You are joining a membership that is radically committed to Paul Ryan. And
how about if we allow him to answer your questions rather than make a speech?
Well, I don't know what the question was, but what part of that was the question?
What influence you would have for the Bowles in the Republican Party?
First of all, thank you for asking the question. By all national media accounts, whether or not you like it, the Republicans will keep the House. So do we want someone who can sit at the table to influence the conversation at the table, or do we want somebody who can get into the room to influence that conversation? Whether or not you like it, the Republicans will keep the House. So I espouse the Simpson-Bowles plan because I think it's good for America. I think it has a balance there. It talks about cutting loopholes and tax expenditures. Right.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's been 54 seconds.
And tax expenditures, so I think we need to look at, like I said, all the departments within the federal government to cut waste and fraud.
Did you need more time since I said?
No, I'm
interrupted you? No? Congressman, would you like to comment on that? We'll allow each.
Yeah, I think the question is an important one. I don't think you ever vote for, I hope people don't vote for a candidate who doesn't share their values, who's committed to an agenda which is extreme and not right for Rhode Island because they have made a calculation that that party's going to be in power. The way we change that is you fight hard to make sure that they don't remain in control of Congress. And so I think you vote for a person who you think is going to stand up and fight for the things that matter to you and your families, even if it means you have to stand up and fight against a majority of the Congress. And in some ways, it's really important if the Republicans take control that we have people there that are fighting relentlessly to protect Medicare, to be sure that it's a balanced approach to the budget, and that revenues are generated, tax loopholes are closed. And you know, the reality is in Washington, the party that controls, look, I work with Republicans, we should of course try to work together, that's obvious. But we also have to be true to our values. We have to protect our values and the values of our country. And the reality is the party in control of the Congress sets the agenda for the 2 years. And they decide what bills are heard, they decide what bills are not heard. That's what matters, that first vote, what party's in power. The president put forth the American Jobs Act, a comprehensive jobs bill. The president of the United States didn't get a hearing on the bill or a vote because the Republican House leadership decided he wasn't going to get one. So there are consequences to what party, you know, what side of the aisle you sit on, and that's party sets the agenda for 2 years, and you are absolutely right. The Republicans took a pledge, 98% of them, to Grover Norquist, a lobbyist, that says revenues, closing a tax loophole is off the table. And so they can't be part of the solution if they honor that pledge, because revenues have to be part of the solution. It has to be done in a balanced way. That's the problem with this extreme Republican leadership in Washington, hijacked by the Tea Party.
Questions? Yes.
I can think of 6 or 7 areas that we haven't covered this morning. What would each of the gentlemen think they would like to make a statement on another area of public policy?
A specific
Area of public policy we haven't addressed this morning.
Is there a specific question that you would like to see addressed? Or any public policy issue that
We
has
lost 6 of them. Protection of children, housing investments, care of the elderly, regulating large nonprofits.
So it's a...
What was the last one, regulating?
Well, the nonprofits in education and in healthcare have become so large now, they're not like the nonprofits that are regulated by various nonprofit regulations.
So this is kind of an open season question. I think the congressman should, if we're going to switch
Oh, sure.
off.
Those are all important issues. I think that the importance of addressing in a serious way the housing market, I think, is something which requires urgent attention. I believe that if we don't stabilize the housing market, the idea of a full economic recovery becomes even more difficult. There are ways to do it. I'm part of the housing task force in the Congress that has put forth a lot, and we've co-sponsored lots of legislation to really get at this issue. How do you help homes that are underwater, folks who cannot take advantage of lower interest rates because their houses are underwater? How do we have a serious effort to do principal write-downs, which just the other day a master in the federal court recognized we needed to do? How do we continue to make investments in the production of affordable housing, senior housing, public housing? And I think, you know, this is one of the areas where I think we have got to have much more progress. We have to have programs that are effective and that are helping families stay in their homes. You know, your ability to have a safe, affordable place to live is kind of at the heart and soul of a family, at the heart and soul of a neighborhood, a strong community. So I think on this issue, again, there's a big difference. The Republicans in the House have proposed deep, deep cuts in housing programs at a time when we need to be investing in housing programs to stabilize the housing market. We need to hold the big banks accountable for what behaviors they engaged in. But there's a big difference between the two. My record is very strong on, as is our whole delegation, on protecting housing and making investments to stabilize the housing market. I think it's a really, really important issue.
Thank you. And an open question.
Can I speak to that?
Absolutely.
I think it's, actually, Congressman and I probably agree quite a bit on this issue. I think it's very, very important that we focus on the people who are upside down or underwater, if you will.
No, proceed.
Okay. Underwater, if you will, with their mortgages. I have a close friend who bought a house a few years ago in the recession and bought it high and is underwater and is not doing well. Not doing well at work now, and this fellow's underwater. He could never dig his way out of this. Trying to modify that loan, and by the way, it has an interest rate of about 10%, and knows that we have about 4% interest rates now. He's trying to modify it, the bank won't let him. He's been borrowing money to pay his mortgage all these years. And we're talking about, this is about we're going on for 3 or 4 years with this fellow. So we need more opportunities. We need the banks to be able to work with these people who are underwater, to be able to make an investment in that piece of property, because the last thing the bank wants is the key to be mailed to them. But they're not allowing, a lot of banks are not allowing people to modify their loans.
Thank you.
Jay?
We talk about cuts, serious cuts, Simpson goals, sequestration from the military. It said you cannot conduct foreign policy without a strong military. And with doing that, trying to do it without a strong military, is like an orchestra with no instruments. I think you have an answer for this. You would love to cut the military, we can't. And I want to know if that's a major part of this budget.
I think you're
Sure.
first.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think it's vital that we keep the strongest military in the world. We can't have cuts to the military right now. I'm a firm believer that there's fraud in the defense industry in Afghanistan. We've seen reports that there's billions of dollars worth of fraud. That's something we need to eliminate. But our military, especially in this day and age with what's happening in the Arab Spring, what's happening around the world, we need the strongest military in the world. We can't have cuts. Congressman Cicilline voted for the left-leaning progressive budget that cuts the Navy fleet. And I just don't think that's good for America. And by the way, we have 16,000 defense industry jobs in the Quinnipiac Island. That would kill jobs here on Rhode Island. I had the opportunity yesterday to take a tour at one of the defense industry companies on Quinnipiac Island. They employ 350 people. And aside from it being an economic disaster for Rhode Island, if the defense is cut, it's not good for the country. America needs to maintain a strong military presence.
Thank you.
I think there's no question that our greatest responsibility as a national government is to keep Americans safe here and here at home and all over the world. And we, of course, have to have the strongest and best defense in the world. But we also have to recognize that we have to do it smartly, that we have to take advantage of new technologies and do it in the most cost-efficient way. And frankly, it's disingenuous to talk about dealing with our deficit in a responsible way and say, but defense is completely off the table. That's just not, it's just not possible. And there are ways we can do it. We have troops, for example, in Europe. That there are many places where there have been proposals to reduce our troop presence in Europe. Probably a good idea. Probably not something we need to do. There have been weapon systems that the Pentagon has said, we don't need these. We don't want these weapon systems. Billions of dollars, but Congress approves them anyway because everyone has some piece of it in their district. So I think we need to do it. We need to have a defense that's the best in the world. We need to be sure that we continue to have the strongest defense in the world to protect our interests here and all over the world. But we have to do it in a smart way, take advantage of new technologies, have a smart defense, and do it in the most cost-efficient way, and look for ways that we can reduce or produce savings in our defense budget. But you can't be serious about the deficit if you take half, the entire defense budget and say, you can't look at it all. That just doesn't make sense.
Can we stay 5 minutes late, Eric and Ian? Will that work?
Actually, no. There's a program that begins here at 10:15.
10:15, all right. We've had one person with her hand up. I apologize. Perhaps candidates can stay in the lobby afterward to answer people's questions, but we've had one person very diligent about raising her hand. I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Yes. I want to address Congressman Cicilline. I heard President Obama quoted as saying that Israel should negotiate peace borders from the pre-1967 lines, which would, any nation...
Again, a question, please, not.
Yes, the question is, Do you agree with Obama's statement, if it's true, with his quotation, that Israel should negotiate from those vulnerable borders after 64 years of do you believe that Israel should negotiate from the pre-67 lines and make her more?
And I don't think that's what the president said. I don't think that's what the president said. I think that he clarified that claim that was made about what he said. So no, I don't think the president said that. I don't think it's the right position.
Mr. Doherty gave a comment.
Wow, that's what I heard over conservative radio.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. You probably heard some other stuff over conservative radio.
Let's face it.
No, we're really asking questions.
Make phony statements of
We're really
security,
asking,
and it isn't
we're
true.
asking questions, not speechifying. Would you like to speak to that?
The Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, what he just tried to push last year was in direct conflict with the PLO, Oslo Accords, and I think that we need to, again, support the people of the state of Israel in every aspect.
Thank you.
Okay, I did not realize we had to be out of here precisely 10:15. Perhaps each of the gentlemen can be in the lobby afterward. I'd like to offer each of them the opportunity to give a closing statement. I thank you all for your interest, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. I thought we'd be out of here done and cleaned out by
We have to be
10:15.
done. We have to be done.
I'm happy to just wait for a closing statement and do more questions.
All right,
Mr. Doherty is agreeable.
does that work for you, Mr.
So,
Doherty? Okay, Ellie, I know that you had a question, you were very diligent.
Mr. Doherty's view on the fact that women are being attacked by Republicans.
Yeah,
Could you repeat the question?
the question was, she wants to know what my view is on women being attacked by the Republican Party. I can only speak to my own position. I'm my own man. I've stood tall throughout my career for women. I was the colonel of the state police. For those of you who don't know me too well, I was the colonel of the state police and also the commissioner of public safety. And I advocated for women's rights with the VAWA grants and the VOCA grants. And I actually oversaw that agency and made sure that we had the sexual harassment training, domestic violence training, the training pertaining to protecting women. So, I don't know what I know that the congressman tries to push this off as a national agenda. I can only speak for myself. I've protected women throughout my career. I've been involved. I've been involved. I'll speak to that. I've been involved in some very, very difficult situations throughout my career where I stood up for women.
I'm sorry, Colonel. I'm getting you more time.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
In women's rights. And I think, are you asking me about the abortion issue?
Reproductive rights.
As an article of my faith, I'm pro-life. I'm a social conservative, but I'm not a social crusader. I just happen to believe that everyone has the right to be born.
Yeah, I think this is, again, I admire what Mr. Doherty said about his work as a state police, but this is about what you're going to do when you get to Washington, where you're going to stand on these issues. The Republicans in Congress, and this is not my words, these are words of most national women's organizations, have been engaged in an assault on women. They, number one, have tried in many ways to undermine women's reproductive health care and access to contraceptives. They have refused to pass equal pay for equal work. They have refused to pass, and Mr. Doherty agrees with this position, the Strengthened Violence Against Women Act. The Senate, in a bipartisan way, Republicans and Democrats, passed a version which strengthens VAWA, includes underserved populations of immigrant women, women from rural communities, LGBT women, and Native Americans. And Mr. Doherty takes the same position as the House Republicans. No, pass the old version, the weakened VAWA version. So this is about who's going to stand up and fight for these issues for women. And this has been an ongoing attack on women. You have said, Mr. Doherty, that you believe that if they want to strengthen VAWA, they should pass another bill. That's the House Republican. You did say that. Mr. Doherty, you said in a prior occasion you support the House Republicans' taking up in a separate bill. The House Republican leadership has refused to take up the Senate bill, which is a straight and vow, a bipartisan bill, and you agree with that
You're barking up the
position.
wrong tree on this.
You agree with that
I
position?
actually administered the VAWA grants.
And you,
It's Violence Against Women's Act, folks, that aren't familiar with this. And the Department of Public Safety was in charge of, on my direction, the Grants Administration Office, where these funds would come in from Washington. And I supported all of those initiatives. Congressman, I'm
Mr.
not
Doherty, are you
clear.
now taking the position, today that what you've said for the past 3 weeks in this campaign, that you do not support the Senate version, which is a bipartisan strengthened vote, but instead you said, the exact
No,
words
see-
you said is, if
You
the
just
House
say
wants...
strengthen VAWA. It's not strengthening VAWA.
Yes, it is strengthening.
What my comment was, if you want to pass another bill for some other walks of life, pass another bill.
That's
But
the point. That's the
here's
House
point.
position. The
But
House
here's the
position is
point.
don't
They
include
come
those
under
4
VOCA.
walks
Do you know
of
what
life.
VOCA is? Do you know what VOCA
Yeah,
is?
there's the
What is VOCA?
point, there's exactly my point, and I think I still have time. There's exactly my point. The House Republicans have refused to take up the Violence Against Women Act that was passed by the Senate. Every Republican woman voted for it because it strengthens VAWA. It adds, although he calls them other walks of life, it's women who live in rural communities. It's
They're already
LGBT
covered.
women.
They're already
It's
covered.
Native American
They're
women.
already covered.
It's the immigrant population. So
underserved
those
community,
underserved
Dave. You're being
communities are
intellectually
in
dishonest
the
with
Senate
these
version
folks.
that Mr.
You know
Doherty
they're already
doesn't
covered.
support. And that's the House Republican leadership position is, let's pass the weakened bill, and then maybe we can take up a new bill. That's wrong. A victim is a victim. We should
victim
pass
is a victim.
the
They're covered under
strengthened
VAWA and
VAWA
VOCA.
Act.
Let's
VAWA,
have,
folks, is the violence of victims.
does he have time? Okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. You don't have time.
Yes, I'm already late.
Time.
He's taking up time for 3 more questions, but
We schedule around stuff.
Right, no, you've got time.
Yes.
VOCA is,
Okay, I get it.
we all set?
You've got time.
VOCA is Victims Against Crime Act. All of the people he's talking about that would be covered under VOCA and VAWA. So he's being a little disingenuous in how he's explaining this because it's actually in my bailiwick. I manage and
There are over 100
administer these programs.
There are over 100.
Excuse me, sir. Sir, please. Please give me the respect to finish. So I manage those under my direction as not Colonel of State Police, but the Commissioner of Public Safety. And again, I go back to my career as fighting for women and fighting for women's rights. I had some of the most horrific cases in the state come before the state police. And we put so much effort into any woman who was a victim of crime. I would assign 3, 4 detectives to follow up, especially on batterers of women, rapists. That's what I did in my career. I protected women in that respect, and I'm proud of what I did.
Just to be clear, there are over 100 women's organizations who have actively supported the strength and violence.
I just want to thank everybody for coming in here, and I want to thank, they don't have extra time.
I know, but I would like to,
I just want to thank the CRC, and I'm going to let you speak. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you very much.
we do have,
And turning it over to Mr. Cooper.
okay, we do have a program, Be Safe this fall, that's sponsored by the Miriam and the Jewish Alliance. I encourage everybody to go to it. You're all welcome to do this with everybody that's in there. At the same time, the CRC does have a program going down to URIs. October next week. Thank you.